January 17, 1945, the Ardennes forest, Belgium. The snow fell in silence that morning, thick and soft, blanketing the frozen pines in a whiteness so complete it seemed the world had been drained of color. The cold was the kind that bit through wool and leather, that turned breath into fog and fingers into stone. In a clearing, ringed by blackened tree stumps and the skeletal remains of a burned-out half-track, a circle of German soldiers stood watching a lone American prisoner. He was young, perhaps 22, 23, with a face still boyish beneath the grime and the frost that clung to his stubble. His uniform was torn at the shoulder, streaked with mud and blood, though none of it seemed to be his own. His hands were bound behind his back with wire, the kind used to secure artillery shells, and his M1 Garand lay in pieces at the feet of an Oberleutnant who had personally disassembled it, searching for anything of intelligence value. The American smiled. It was not a nervous smile, not the grin of a man trying to curry favor or deflect fear. It was something else entirely, something calm, almost serene, as if he knew a secret the men around him did not. The German officer frowned. He had interrogated dozens of American prisoners in the past month, since the launch of Operation Wacht am Rhein, the great counteroffensive the Allies would come to call the Battle of the Bulge. Most were frightened boys from Iowa or Texas, barely trained, weeping for their mothers or bartering chocolate for mercy. But this one was different. The smile remained. By the winter of 1945, the German Wehrmacht was a shadow of the force that had blitzed across Poland and France 5 years prior. The soldiers standing in that frozen clearing were not the supermen of Nazi propaganda. They were hollow-eyed survivors of Stalingrad and Normandy, clad in uniforms patched with blankets, their boots held together with wire and hope. Many had not eaten a full meal in weeks. Their rations consisted of black bread so hard it had to be soaked in melted snow, and ersatz coffee made from acorns that tasted like dirt and regret. The Oberleutnant, his name was Klaus Richter, a schoolteacher from Munich before the war, had learned not to expect much from prisoners. The Americans were soft, or so he had been told. They came from a nation of excess, of jazz music and Hollywood films, a people who had never known true hardship, who fought not for survival, but for distant ideals they barely understood. Richter had believed this once. He had believed many things once. But the smile unnerved him. He ordered the prisoners searched again. The soldiers found nothing. No hidden weapons, no cyanide capsule, no maps or codes, only a single item tucked into the inner pocket of the American's jacket. A small tin of Spam, the rectangular key still attached to its lid. Richter picked it up, turning it over in his gloved hands. He had seen these before, scavenged from supply drops or pulled from the packs of dead GIs. Spam. The Americans sent their soldiers into battle with canned meat, processed pork and ham, seasoned with salt and sugar, sealed in a tin that could survive a mortar blast. It was absurd. It was decadent. It was, Richter thought bitterly, the most American thing he had ever seen. The prisoner's smile widened.
The Wehrmacht had not known, could not have known, what it meant to fight an enemy that ate 3 meals a day. In the first years of the war, German logistics were the envy of Europe, a precision machine of railroads and supply depots, of carefully calculated tonnages and timetables. But by 1945, the machine had collapsed. The railways were bombed into ribbons. The depots were ash. The horses that pulled the artillery wagons were slaughtered for food when the grain ran out, and the grain ran out everywhere, all the time, in every corner of the shrinking Reich. The average German soldier in the Ardennes received 1,500 calories per day, barely enough to sustain a man at rest, let alone one marching through snow and fighting for his life. Frostbite claimed as many men as bullets. Hunger gnawed at morale more effectively than any Allied propaganda leaflet. Richter himself had lost 20 pounds since October. His belt, cinched to the last hole, still felt loose. And yet the Americans seemed to have everything. When German troops overran an American supply depot in the opening days of the Bulge, they found mountains of food, crates of Spam and corned beef, powdered eggs and chocolate bars, coffee so rich it smelled like a dream half remembered. They found cigarettes by the carton, chewing gum, even Coca-Cola, bottles of it, frozen solid, but still recognizably, impossibly American. Some soldiers wept, others laughed. Many simply ate until they were sick, their shrunken stomachs rebelling against the sudden abundance. One lieutenant wrote in his diary, "We are not fighting men, we are fighting a factory." The prisoner's name was James Edward Collier, though the Germans would never learn it. He was from a town called Modesto in California, a place of almond orchards and summer heat, where the biggest problem before the war had been whether the high school football team would make the playoffs. He had enlisted 3 days after Pearl Harbor, lying about a childhood knee injury to get past the medical exam. He wanted to fight. He wanted to matter. By January 1945, Collier was a corporal in the 101st Airborne Division, a unit that had been encircled at Bastogne and was now fighting its way out, mile by frozen mile. He had killed his first German soldier in Normandy, a boy no older than 17, who had stumbled into Collier's foxhole by accident and died with a look of surprise still frozen on his face. Collier had vomited afterward, shaking so hard he could barely reload his rifle. By the Ardennes, he had stopped counting. He had been separated from his unit during a skirmish 3 days prior, pinned down by mortar fire in a farmhouse basement while the rest of his squad retreated. When the shelling stopped, he emerged to find himself alone, surrounded by German patrols. He evaded them for 2 days, moving only at night, chewing on a Hershey bar he had saved in his pack and drinking from streams that were half ice. On the 3rd day, exhausted and disoriented, he walked into a clearing and found himself staring at the muzzle of a Mauser rifle. They bound his hands and marched him to a makeshift command post, a cluster of tents and half-tracks hidden in the trees. Richter questioned him in accented but fluent English, asking about troop movements, supply routes, artillery positions. Collier said nothing. He had been trained for this, drilled in the code of conduct: name, rank, serial number. Nothing else, nothing ever. But he smiled, because Collier knew something Richter did not.
The Oberleutnant grew impatient. He had orders to extract information and, failing that, to send the prisoner to a rear echelon POW camp where professionals could handle him. But the camp was 30 kilometers away, and the roads were clogged with retreating units, and Richter had a creeping suspicion that the war was nearly over, that all of this, the interrogation, the cold, the tin of Spam sitting on his folding table, was already meaningless. Still, he tried. "Your division is surrounded," he said, leaning forward, his breath misting in the frigid air. "Your supplies are cut. Bastogne will fall, and your generals will retreat. Why do you smile?" Collier's smile did not waver. Richter slammed his fist on the table. The tin of Spam jumped, rattling on the wood. "What is funny?" he demanded. "You are a prisoner. Your war is over." Collier finally spoke. His voice was quiet, almost conversational, the kind of tone a man might use to comment on the weather. "We're not surrounded. You are." The Germans left him tied to a tree while they debated what to do. It was late afternoon now, the pale winter sun already sinking toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the snow. Collier could hear them arguing in low voices, could see the tension in their movements, the way they kept glancing over their shoulders as if expecting something to emerge from the forest. They were afraid. Collier understood them with a clarity that surprised him, that these men were not the enemy he had been taught to hate. They were not monsters or fanatics. They were just soldiers, cold and hungry and far from home, clinging to a cause that had already lost. He almost pitied them. Almost. Because Collier also knew
had been taught, had seen with his own eyes, that the Wehrmacht had burned villages and shot prisoners, that the SS had done things so evil they defied language, that the regime these men served had built factories for murder. Pity was a luxury he could not afford. The smile returned. What happened next would be recorded in fragmentary accounts, stitched together from survivor testimony and battlefield reports. The details vary, but the outline remains consistent. At approximately 1700 hours, an American patrol, elements of the 101st Airborne pushing east toward Foy, encountered the German position. The firefight was brief and brutal. The Germans, caught off guard and low on ammunition, attempted to retreat, but the forest offered no cover from the M1 Garons and Browning automatic rifles that tore through the trees. Collier, still bound to the tree, watched as the Oberleutnant fell, clutching his stomach, his face a mask of confusion. A German corporal tried to surrender, hands raised, but was shot anyway. The Lapper, the sergeant who fired, would later claim he thought the man was reaching for a grenade. The lie was accepted without question. When the shooting stopped, 14 German soldiers lay dead in the snow. 7 more were wounded, moaning and bleeding, their cries echoing through the twilight. An American private cut Collier's bonds. His wrists were raw, the wire having bitten deep into the flesh. He flexed his fingers, wincing at the pain, and accepted the rifle someone pressed into his hands.
"You okay, Corp?" the sergeant asked. Collier nodded. He was not okay. He was cold and exhausted, and his hands shook so badly he could barely grip the rifle. But he was alive, and that was enough. The wounded Germans were gathered in the clearing. Standard procedure was to treat enemy wounded. The Geneva Convention was clear on this, but resources were limited, and the patrol had no medic. The sergeant looked at Collier. "Your call," he said. Collier understood what was being asked. He thought of the Oberleutnant, of the wire around his wrists, of the days spent freezing and starving while the Germans debated his fate. He thought of Normandy, of the boy in the foxhole, of all the small and large cruelties that had brought him to this frozen clearing in Belgium. He thought of the tin of Spannum sitting on Richter's table, and he smiled. 21 German soldiers died in that clearing, 14 in the firefight, 7 afterward. The official report would list all deaths as occurring during the engagement. No one questioned it. No one cared. By late January, the Battle of the Bulge was over, the Wehrmacht in full retreat, the war entering its final blood-soaked months. One small skirmish, 21 dead Germans. It was a footnote, a statistic, less than nothing in the vast calculus of the war. But for those who were there, it meant everything. The American soldiers did not speak of it, not to each other, not to the chaplains or psychiatrists who would later try to catalog their trauma. It became a silence they carried, a weight no one else could see. Collier himself never mentioned it, not in letters home, not in the barroom stories he would tell decades later when the war had become a myth and the men who fought it were ghosts. But he never stopped smiling. There is a photograph, though it is not widely known, taken by a Signal Corps photographer who stumbled upon the scene the next morning. It shows the clearing, the bodies half buried in fresh snow, and in the foreground a single tin of Spam, rusted and dented, lying on its side in the frozen mud. The photograph was never published. It was filed away in an archive, lost among thousands of other images from the war, its significance unrecognized. But those who have seen it report a strange feeling, a sense of wrongness they cannot quite articulate. Perhaps it is the emptiness of the scene, the way the snow has erased all trace of what happened, leaving only the tin as evidence. Perhaps it is the knowledge of what that tin represents, not just food, but abundance. Not just abundance, but ideology, the uniquely American belief that there is always more, that scarcity is a failure of will, that even in war, even in death, there should be enough for everyone. Or perhaps it is something simpler, more human, the recognition that in the calculus of survival, morality is a luxury, and mercy is reserved for those who can afford it. James Edward Collier returned to Modesto in October 1945. He married his high school sweetheart, worked as a mechanic, raised 3 children in a house with a white picket fence and a lawn he mowed every Saturday.
He voted in every election, attended church most Sundays, and never spoke about the war except in the vaguest terms. He was, by all accounts, a good man.
But those who knew him well, his wife, his eldest son, would sometimes catch him staring into the middle distance, a faint smile on his lips, as if he were remembering a joke only he understood. He died in 1998 of a heart attack while watching a baseball game on television. His obituary listed his service in the 101st Airborne, his Purple Heart and Bronze Star, his decades of work at the garage. It did not mention the clearing in the Ardennes, or the 21 men who died there, or the smile that never quite left his face. The tin of Spam, symbol of American abundance, of the factories and farms and railroads that kept an army fed and fighting, would outlast the war by decades. Tins like it can still be found in antique shops and estate sales, their labels faded but recognizable, artifacts of a conflict that reshaped the world. But for those who fought, who killed and nearly died in frozen forests and shattered cities, the tin represents something else. The knowledge that survival is not a virtue, that history is written by the victors, and that the line between hero and monster is thinner than we would like to believe. James Edward Collier smiled because he understood this, because he knew, in a way the Germans never could, that the war was not about ideology or courage or even justice. It was about who had more guns, more tanks, more food, more men willing to die for a cause they barely understood. It was about the tin of Spam, sitting on a table in a frozen forest, a monument to excess in a world of scarcity. And in the end, excess won. Epilogue. In the archives of the National World War II Museum in New Orleans, there is a small display case containing artifacts from the Battle of the Bulge. Among the helmets and bayonets and faded photographs, there sits a tin of Spam, donated by the family of a veteran whose name is not recorded. The label is peeling, the metal spotted with rust, but the key is still attached, a promise that inside, preserved and waiting, is something that will sustain. Visitors pass by without noticing. Children press their faces to other cases, drawn to the drama of weapons and medals. Adults read the plaques describing troop movements and casualty figures, trying to make sense of a war that killed 60 million people over 6 years of madness. But the tin remains, silent and patient, a relic of a time when the world tore itself apart and put itself back together, when young men killed each other over ideals and resources and the simple, brutal logic of survival. It is a monument to abundance, to ideology, to the smile on the face of a prisoner who knew, even as wire bit into his wrists, that he would outlast his captors, not through courage or strength, but through the simple, overwhelming fact of having more food, more bullets, more tomorrows. The tin of Spam sits in its case, waiting for someone to understand what it means, waiting for someone to see the smile.